Well, the world is a dumpster fire. Nothing here makes sense. And you vacillate between crippling fear and constant self-defense. And nothing's right and nothing's good. And you're paralyzed with grief. Don't kill yourself, just have a cup of coffee.
Welcome to Coffee Over Suicide, the dramedy podcast about mental illness and choosing life over death one cup of coffee at a time. I'm your host, Chris Parker Howard. Today on the show, we have comedian Allison Rose. And it's really an awesome conversation, and I can't wait for you to get into it. But I do need to let you know that right out of the gate, we go somewhere pretty heavy. If you follow the stand-up comedy scene in Colorado, then you may have heard of Allison Kennedy. It's a rough one. I honestly don't want to get into the details on that because I at this point I'm just not sure it's my place to say. What I can say is the story of that tragedy hit me pretty deep. And I know a lot of people out there who are struggling right now. And I had a friend post something to Facebook several times over the course of the past couple of months that seemed to lean toward, thoughts of self-harm and things of that nature. And I never really knew what to do about it, honestly, because it just... It's one of those things where you see somebody who's grasping out for some kind of a life preserver. And sometimes that grasping can seem a little scary and a little violent. And you don't really know how to process that. You don't know if you're going to be more harm than good. You don't know if you're going to damage your friendship by reaching out. You don't know if you're misreading signals. How serious is it? Are they just having a bad time? Are they just saying this out of anger? And you don't really know if you should reach out and say something, or if you should just keep to yourself and just kind of let it go. And for the most part, I've just kind of been letting it go because I really didn't know what to do. Until the other day, after everything that's been going on, I decided enough of that. I'm going to take a chance and I'm going to say something. And I don't know how it's going to be received. But if you care about somebody, you might be willing to take the hit. And I understand if you're not. I understand if you're unsure if you're going to be more harm than good, if you're going to be the thing that's going to push somebody over the edge. I understand that fear. It's very real. It can sometimes happen, where you step in and somebody just says, yeah, well, fuck you. And they're out. It can. I'm not going to lie. I've seen it happen. Does that mean it actually is your fault? It actually is you? No. But I know how I would feel if it was me. I know nobody would be able to tell me otherwise. That I could rationalize it all I wanted in my head, but ultimately, what are you going to do? Are you going to keep yourself all locked inside yourself, small and safe and guarded from every angle? Why? What is the point of that? Are you really even living at that point? There is so much pain and vulnerability waiting for you out there. But on the other side of that willingness to be open, that willingness to take a chance and maybe even alienate some people by just being yourself, there's real beauty and courage and an amazing life on the other side of that. And I see somebody like Allison Kennedy, and I see that beauty, and I see a level of that fearlessness. And it's hard to watch. It's hard to watch that be snuffed out by negativity and doubt. But we have to remember that there is good in everything. And that you can make choices. And sometimes those choices are painful. But painful choices a lot of times do yield some results. And they take you to the other side of what could have been something that felt like it was going to last forever. And then it doesn't. Because nothing does. That's kind of the beauty of this whole entire human experiment, is that it doesn't last forever. I think about all of the times that I was on the edge and looking for a way out. And sometimes I was looking for a way out, and sometimes I was looking for just a way to get away from myself, because there was a lot about me I didn't like. In other times, it's a lot about the world outside that I don't like. There's a lot of complicated emotions that are wrapped up in all of that. But there is beauty in that complication. And it's a rough thing to struggle with. I completely get it. I completely get it. But if you need somebody to talk to, you should talk to somebody. And if you see somebody struggling, you should talk to that person. Just check in. Just be like, hey, you all right? What's going on? You don't necessarily have to get in depth. But sometimes that's enough. All right. Was this too heavy? I feel like this was pretty heavy. I'll tell you what. The opening conversation at the beginning is going to be a little heavy. But we'll get through that part. And it turns into something pretty amazing. Let's talk to Allison Rose.
Good morning.
Afternoon, whatever it is.
It's one of the two, right in the middle, you know?
Yeah. Things have been really, really crazy in the community lately.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was a really rough week.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, what about you? How are you dealing?
I'm doing okay. I didn't know, you're talking about Alison.
Yeah.
I didn't know her that well.
Mm-hmm.
I'd gotten to do like a show with her like about 2.5 years ago. And
yeah.
I remember like after the show, like thinking that I would just like see her around a lot. I didn't realize at the time she lived up in Laramie. Like I was just like, oh, she was really funny.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm gonna like some comics you see them for the first time, you're like, you don't remember their face or anything, you know. But she was memorable. And then I like saw her a week ago or so. I just always feel what's going on in like everybody in the community just feels it together. Some too, even if they weren't close. It's still a loss. And
totally. I mean, it's a group. You're a part of the scene. You're in something.
Yeah, we grieve together, and also just like the circumstances of her passing and like her family being a big part of it. It's just like it was just hate that did it, and it just. Everybody's angry and sad all at once, and there's just nothing to do, you know. So everybody feels that together. But
yeah, I didn't. Man, I didn't even mean to start so heavy.
I mean, we had to talk about it. You know, we have to talk about her. You know, so.
Yeah. I mean, I had only seen her. I hadn't met her. So I mean, for me, it was different because I made an attempt at being a part of the stand-up comedy community. And then, I got busy with so many things. It requires so much time and so much focus and so much energy. And I was juggling it between, like I have 1,000 different pursuits that I'm always trying to conquer at any given time. And if you can't put in that kind of work, you're not going to get anywhere. Because you have to go out and be terrible for a long time before you're any good. Yeah. And I was comfortable being terrible.
Well, that's all you need.
Yeah, I just needed more time, and I just didn't have it. But I did pull some friendships, out of that, and so it's I don't know, like I still follow it. It still kind of affects me when I see people like, a couple of years ago when Dick Black was struggling so hard, and it was like, what the fuck is going on there? I don't know. It's just kind of a strange thing. I'm sort of noticing a lot of struggle in a lot of the artist communities. A lot of my friends are musicians because I play in bands and stuff like that. So it just kind of seems to be going around and hitting everybody at the moment. Yeah, and I think, I don't know, we're all extra sensitive in those communities, and it's just a hard time, like, I don't know. Yeah. So everything's crashing at once. Let's take it back to before the crash. So where did you grow up?
I grew up until I was 15. I grew up on a wheat farm in the middle of Kansas.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah. It was good until I was about 12, you know?
Yeah.
When I was 15, we moved like 2 miles into town, like a small town, 450 people. I always say, like, like 60 to 90 of them were in a nursing home, so still, like, like real small. I really, like I said, growing up when you're real little, a farm, great. I just, like, could explore, like, big pastures, hay bales, barns, where you would, like, go in and find, like, a litter of kittens sometimes and a raccoon other times, just, like, treasures everywhere. It was, like, very, very, very isolated, kind of set that tone for my life, Did a lot of reading and writing and playing with animals. And
the things that are going to make you interesting.
Sure. And also sad.
Yes.
Yeah.
Precisely.
Yeah.
So you said until you were, like, 12, so then you came to...
Well, yeah, it was good until I was 12, and then you get kind of bored. But
okay, yeah, I see.
We just moved into town when I was like 15 or so. So we just sold the farm, and moved into town. My parents still, when I was real little, they bought the local newspaper, so I grew up like doing all of that too. And then
that's awesome.
Yeah, that was really cool. Because I got to see like the evolution of the printing and all of that. Kind of stuff,
Yeah.
Yeah, when I was 15, we just moved into town, stopped farming. Still the same place, but...
Yeah. What kind of kid were you?
I was dramatic and... I didn't have a lot of friends. I was one of those, like, classic, like, one friend kind of at a time. Yeah. Yeah, and then my, like, best friend, like, moved away when I was in 3rd grade, so for a couple years I was pretty much by myself. Like, I wrote a book in 5th grade, and like I didn't care at that point that I was probably the loser in the class, because I was like straight A's and things like that. My older sisters were like we were like the good family, just like did everything and were real nice and farming. I don't know. Still the morning.
But when your friend moves away at a young age, I think one of the things that it teaches you subconsciously is that people can leave. And that can leave a mark on you and affect other relationships later down the road when you realize that, maybe you're a person who wants to only have one friend at a time because it's a lot easier to manage.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, when he moved, we were going to, like, get married and things.
Right,
like,
of course,
had, like, 2 fights our whole lives, and when you're 8, that seems pretty good, just 2.
Yeah.
But, yeah, he moved away, and I was very, very sad for a while. I think it just, like, retreated into myself more, which was fine.
Yeah. And you're already introverted.
Yeah.
So to retreat into yourself even farther. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's not nothing.
Yeah, but at the time it was good for, a couple years. I don't.
Were you quiet?
Yeah, I was very quiet. I remember, like, with my older sisters, like, my mom was, like, worried because, like, they would come home and, like, complain about things, and then she'd, like, find me just, like, alone crying on my bed, like, not talking.
Yeah.
I think, like, part of that I always go back to, we had, like, a foster brother when I was, like, 3. He was, like, the same age. I don't remember him a lot. Like, I met him later when we were older still. Like, he was still a part of our lives, but I don't remember the young stuff a lot. But my mom would, like, my dad really wanted to adopt him, and my mom's told the story of just, like, she knew that we couldn't because she had saw it, like, affecting me because he'd been abused already at 3.
Yeah.
Would, like, take him into therapy, and he'd, like, throw fits, and I would, like, walk around and pick things up quietly behind him, just, like, internalize all that. Like, she felt like I could see that I couldn't be a problem.
Yeah.
So just always been quiet, but...
Yeah. Man. So, I mean, how did that manifest later? Like, I imagine that had to be interesting as a teenager.
Which part?
Just being the child who grew up in that situation, and started to internalize everything and be so quiet. Mm-hmm. Like, I mean, there are several layers there that lead to a person kind of withdrawing, and I mean, people take that kind of, I don't know, for lack of a better word, let's say light trauma.
Sure.
People take that and they turn it into different things. Mm-hmm. And so some people find a way to express it with artistic tendencies. Some people buy an outfit, some people, trying to make themselves a different version of themselves than the one that they see on the inside. But everybody kind of turns into the person they're going to be based on everything that happened to them up to a certain point. Mm-hmm. And so just hearing the ways that you were by yourself a lot, off in the wheat, reading a book, chasing squirrels and things. And then being afraid to be bad because you didn't want to be treated poorly.
I didn't want to be a burden.
Or exactly. Yeah. I mean, you look at that, and that can take you down several different roads. Mm-hmm. Like as a person. I mean, what did that look like for you?
Well, like I said, when we moved into town, like we had a big house because Kansas, very cheap. No one wants to buy those houses, so we got it. But I had like the whole upstairs to myself, like right at 15, right when the real angst hits, you know.
Totally.
And my sisters had graduated, so it was just like me and my parents. And I'd always written, so I kept writing like, poems and stories and books. Freshman year, I wrote another book. It's real bad. And then, I kept kind of just keeping to myself. I kind of felt like I was a little better than the people in my school, in my hometown, because they would just go out mudding and things like that. And I was like, just wanted more that I didn't even know was out there. But sure. I did a lot of, my old brother-in-law gave me his like 8-track and recording stuff, so I would just lock myself in a room and make a bunch of different songs. And I had an older friend who gave me a bunch of different music. Like I remember the first artist I really got into that he gave me was Syd Barrett. Yeah. Like I attached to that kind of outsider, kind of crazy, like that part of the culture that I was exposed to a little bit. And I've lost track of what I was saying.
You know what, though? I think that it is kind of interesting. I can identify with some of that too, because I think that there is a thing that when you're in your teen years, you're you're going to feel kind of weirdly self-righteous about something. Mm-hmm. And if you're a pretty intelligent person among people who are averagely intelligent, which there's nothing wrong with that.
Sure.
But you can see yourself a little elevated.
Yeah.
You know?
And I also I became an atheist sophomore year, and I remember being real angry about that.
Yes.
Yelling in English class.
Oh my God. I did a lot of that.
Yeah. And I got real depressed, and I did self-harm and things like that, and then my parents found out about it and put me to a therapist for a while, and I did the thing where you pretend you're fine, and
yeah, of course,
they forget after a bit, you know. I also had when I was 16, my boyfriend was in college. He lived in the hometown. He'd been in high school with me for a year, but then we got close through music after he graduated. So all of my closer connections weren't there. They weren't around me.
Yeah.
So it's just more isolation.
Yeah.
But I was just very romantic, dramatic.
Yeah.
Dove into that really, really hard in high school.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you were writing books and everything, and even if they're terrible, I mean, do you still have them?
Yeah. So the freshman year book is called The Realm of Insanity, and every chapter started with one of the characters saying, "Welcome to the realm of insanity. The coffee here is free, but I wouldn't recommend drinking it," because it was it's a therapist and his patient, and he'd isolated himself in Colorado with just one-on-one sessions with his patient. So that's how the patient would start every session, and then he would go, "Why shouldn't I drink the coffee?" and go off on this whole. So there was the story there in the house, and the story that was revealing itself in the therapist's or in the patient's stories, and I don't know. That was
but all of that's pretty good, though. I mean, that's not nothing.
You could see it as a Stephen King novel.
Yeah, exactly. I was I got sucked into theater when I was 15, but it wasn't normal theater. I had met a guy. I auditioned for a play because a girl I liked was auditioning, and
that's what you do.
Yeah, and then I got a part and she didn't, and so she didn't like me anymore. And
oh no,
it wasn't a great play. It was high school or whatever. But one of the guys that I was in the play with was a terrible actor. And he was very dramatic, and he wanted to do stuff, and the theater club had no interest. And he was like, "Well, I'll do my own things. Mm-hmm. Do you want to go do this weird theater with me?" I'm like, "Yeah, whatever you're doing, that sounds great." Mm-hmm. And so he just wrote these strange existential comedies, and produced them on his own, wrote, directed. It was crazy. It was absolute insanity. And I was so terrified of being bad that I would just memorize the whole script.
Yeah.
And I was bad anyway, but I knew my lines, and everybody else's lines. And, he went off to California and did stuff. But that was probably 4 or 5 years of my life where I was like, "Oh, I'll be an actor then."
Yeah.
And then, just didn't follow up on that.
Yeah, you go through phases.
Yeah, I did little things here and there, but again, I'm like a dog chasing cars. Just this one's blue. I'm going to chase this one now.
Yeah, I did some of that too. Just any kind of artistic opportunity, which seemed fascinating. I did the music thing for a couple years. I don't know how many CDs I made of trash music, but a lot. Yeah. One of my friends still has them, and that's terrifying. And then mostly writing and art and stuff. We didn't have a whole lot of opportunities in my high school, but I pretty much did all of them, because that's was expected of my family at that point. Because the good people, not the goody two shoes good,
right.
Not we're good at things. But we were decent also. You're expected to do those things because if you don't have enough people doing them, you can't have it. I did like show choir and I don't know, quiz bowl, and we did plays and things. But none of them were great.
Right.
You just did it all because you had to.
Yeah, it was something to do. Mm-hmm. But gravitating towards getting involved in something artistic versus, just driving around, hitting mailboxes with a baseball bat or something. Yeah. Like that's definitely something that speaks to a certain kind of person.
I also did some driving around and hanging out in cemeteries and things.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but I mean, that's dramatic.
Yeah.
That's
very artistic.
That's appropriately dramatic, and heavy and, false, sad, and real sad mixed in with the posturing. It's such a strange time. And then when you grow up into an adult and you start weeding out the posturing, and you're left with the real sadness. Mm-hmm. That's when the shit starts. That's when it gets fun. Yeah. Because then you have to start figuring out what you're going to do with it. And how is it going to define you? And what kind of person do you actually want to be?
Why do you have it?
Yeah. Where did it come from? Because I used to think it didn't matter where it came from. Mm-hmm. Because it's it's here. Doesn't matter where it came from, but actually it does.
Yeah.
It can really... There are certain things that you can't solve by understanding. You can't solve a chemical imbalance by understanding it. I've got bipolar, and so I can understand the chemicals that are happening when mania hits. It doesn't make it leave. Mm-hmm. But there are certain things that are conditioned into you through behavior and through time that, you can solve that Rubik's Cube.
Yeah.
And work your way forward from there. Yeah.
And I think I started to figure out, because just my tendency to withdraw and then just not speak, just wrecked relationship after relationship for me. And I always was had that tendency to reach out for something more. I just couldn't stay still.
Right.
And it took me a while to recognize that. But eventually you realize why you haven't. And some of my early relationships, even in high school, why I just always felt like I had to be there for the other person, which made me eventually not, because I was making it feel like they weren't there for me.
Yeah.
I'm just making myself be there for them. And eventually you can kind of work through that once you recognize it. But it definitely wrecked relationships for a while, and my tendency to just go for more, really, once I got to college. I was the classic, kind of good in high school, not that much around, want to go crazy when you hit college. I should have taken advantage of it and studied and done those things. I had the grades set up for that, but didn't really want to. School was always pretty easy. I still did decent in college, although I got a D, which was had never happened to me. I was just oh shit, I gotta actually go to this class. There's pop quizzes. Okay, fine. Or I'll lose my scholarship. Things like that. So my freshman year of college wasn't great. It was a lot of me lying. It was a lot of me reaching out for everything I could possibly touch and anyone I could. I was just fascinated by people and wanted to. Because I hadn't been around them.
Right. Yeah, you were off in the maze, just. Yeah,
and any sorts of drugs. I always, growing up, my grandmother was diagnosed with schizophrenia, and I think she just had a hard life and was medicated poorly, and she had a son that drowned when he was 7. So I kind of think it was a misdiagnosis. That's what my mom thinks, but she had a really hard life, so I always had it in my head that if I did acid once, I would snap. I always felt like I was gonna go. Mm-hmm. But I was still drawn to it. It just felt like in my narrative that was the next thing. Yeah. It just made sense. I'd written things out. So I had a rough first year, and then when I got back home that summer, a few weeks in, I found out I was pregnant, and ended up keeping the baby and going with the adoption route because it felt like that would be a way for me to settle out. It just felt like something that I could do.
Yeah.
Which made it seem like something I should do. And
sure.
So that kind of like, I don't know, just branched me off, kind of saved me a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, I mean, did you experience any postpartum depression on that?
I mean,
because it sounds like you had depression already. And so, I would have to imagine that, I mean, I honestly don't know how anybody who gives birth doesn't have postpartum or even, has an abortion or, miscarriage, I would have to believe that there's some level of, it's like if I woke up and, half of my heart was missing, or a lung was gone, oh, that's weird. I feel different. But I feel like that's probably not even getting it right either, because there's a lot tied up in that.
Yeah.
That, I mean, I can't imagine it. I don't have a uterus.
Yeah. I mean, my pregnancy was pretty much like the happiest point of my life. Up until then. Like it was easy for me to understand because I was like doing things for someone else still, but it was me, you know, taking care of her, but that made me take care of myself.
Right.
And I found like a perfect family randomly, and it was all like a really great experience. But then, it was over, and I had like my college friends who were just like, when I was pregnant, I would like drive them around because they couldn't, because I couldn't drink, you know.
Exactly.
So it was still like a pretty lonely experience, even though
designated driving for two.
Yeah, they were like fascinated with the pregnancy, and like people were like fascinated with it, but it was still a fairly lonely thing.
Yeah.
And then I was gone, and I had like dreams about still being pregnant and waking up not, and like I had phantom kicks for years, and I ended up just like writing about it. You know, I did my creative writing thesis on it, like nonfiction.
Yeah.
I mean, and so that fucked me up again with relationships. And it's like in the end, it was a good thing for my relationships, but
sure,
it was hard. I don't think I had necessarily like any different depression. I don't think I had another like chemical like postpartum depression, but I was still depressed. Like it changed how my depression was directed. It changed like when I got really low and thought about suicide. Like there she was, you know.
Yeah. I
kind of started thinking, well, if I fuck up, she's going to look me up one day, and that could fuck her up, you know?
Right. So you still think about that now?
Yeah. That when I started comedy, I chose my middle name as my last name because I didn't want her Googling me.
Yeah.
Because she's going to be 10 next year, so
wow.
Like, yeah. She's a little person.
Yeah, exactly.
I still think about it. I think about her when I hear the news and like all the things like that, how they're affecting me, how they would affect a 6, 7, 8-year-old, you know. Totally.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's, that is a thing that it is one of the ways that parenting, even in absentia, even I guess, it changes you. I got a couple of kids, and seeing the world the way that they see the world, and recognizing where it's going, where it's been, the type of situation that they've grown up in versus the situation that I grew up in, it's pretty astounding, because I think in a lot of ways they've got it fine. They're going to be fine. We're fucked up.
Yeah.
But I think they're going to be okay. There's, with every however many generations, there's change that comes along. And with change comes chaos and people kicking and screaming and fighting, and fear of the unknown. And then it mellows. And there's a nice stagnant period of mediocrity. And then there's change. And now we're in a period of change.
And it's terrifying.
It's terrifying. It's absolutely terrifying.
Yeah.
But I think it's more terrifying for us than it is for the younger people.
Well, I mean, that makes sense because they don't recognize the change is happening as much because
Right.
they haven't seen
this
it
is
before.
just what it is.
Yeah, but that scares me just as much. Like, I don't know. Imagine having Trump for president from your 6 to 10 years old. Like that's hugely formative.
Yeah.
Like
yeah.
you get the idea that that's the way the world is.
Right.
Whereas it's terrifying for us because we're, like you said, kicking and screaming through all of the things that are happening.
Right.
But she's just coming into it where it's like, oh yeah, global warming, the planet has 30 years.
Right.
Like that's her base. And I guess, that makes it less
People
scary.
are trying to put women back to the Dark Ages.
Yeah, exactly. All the Kavanaugh, all of those things.
But see, all of those things, too, are very, very public. And maybe they wouldn't have been in our generation. People didn't talk about shit like that.
Right.
But now, people are talking about it. And people are not being silent. And there's a lot of fighting going on. And rightly so. There should be a lot of fighting going on. So, yeah, I guess... maybe I'm completely wrong. Maybe kids should be terrified.
I mean, kids should go play, but
kids should go play.
We can be terrified for them, but
ultimately, I think they're going to do what they're going to do. When they're that small, they'll have fear. I mean, we're all going to have fear. Fear is a driving force. It's a necessary tool. We've all got it, but. That's kind of mind-blowing that you went through something like that. And I mean, it's an unusual story, at least, from my perspective.
Sure.
And so, I mean, that's mind-blowingly wonderful that you would do something like that. And it sounds like it affected you ultimately in a really positive way.
Yeah, it did. And it's, like I said, it was hard, but it taught me a lot. It taught me, it also, it taught me how to take care of myself a little bit, but it also taught me that I could, it made me feel like I could handle anything, which ultimately for me wasn't good.
Right.
Because it made me, throw myself into worse situations. Because it was I'll come out fine,
Yeah.
I gave up a baby, and it'll be
right. Yeah,
it'll be fine. But ultimately,
I'm invincible.
This is what I do. I handle things.
Right.
I go through shitty things, and I'm good.
But in a way, I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't be advocating for this, but in a way, isn't that kind of great?
Sure. I mean, it's good if you figure out how to tame it.
Yeah.
You know, at that point, I was still super depressed. I was still figuring out how to be in the world. Now that it was how big the world was, I was still swimming around and all of that. And I didn't really end up taking care of myself super well. And I kind of had always had that I can handle anything mentality. Yeah. I think that's part of why I did this, because as a little kid, I felt like I could take care of my family, and in hard situations like deaths and things, I was quiet and supportive. And I remember the adoptive father when they flew away with her, being it was really great to meet you too, because you just seem like a really strong person, and it seems like your family should have been looking you should have been looking to your family for support, and it seemed like the opposite. And I just felt it just made me really lonely, though. Yeah. It's a good thing, but it's lonely and dangerous too.
So how is your relationship with your family?
It's my family's great. They're very supportive. They're very sweet. They maybe to a fault. After my daughter was born, I got very close with them again, because they watched me. My dad said it was getting me back again, because I'd separated so much, and they could see it happening through high school. And so my dad also wrote a lot and wanted to be a writer. So for a while we were we're gonna share each other's stories. We have a pact to make each other write. And I've drifted from them now. I'm 29. And I don't call them as much as I should. All those things. Yeah. But it's good. They're they're supportive and
that's excellent.
Yeah.
But I mean, do you think that you initially were kind of away from them because you were off in your own head dealing with your, depression and suicidal tendencies?
Yeah.
It's like you don't want to tell your parents that shit.
Mm-hmm. No, and I...
At what point did you have to?
Did I have to tell them that I was sad?
Yeah.
When I was pregnant, that was like the breaking point. It was just like, fuck, I need help right now. Like, and they were there. Like at first my mom like pushed back against it and was just like shocked. And like my dad immediately was just like, whatever you need. And then she like followed suit. And then, it made me feel like I could share things with them. Not so much anymore. Like I kind of separated again. Yeah. Like after, like a few years ago when I was really, really probably the lowest I've been, like they didn't know, like I remember I hid it from them more, even like going home and like destroying old sad poems because I like didn't want them to find out that I'd always been sad. Yeah. After if I killed myself, I didn't want them going through my things and finding out that. So I separated again from them, but I'm close again. I could share things with them now. Yeah.
That was, it's funny that you mentioned that deliberate thought of, getting that sad stuff out of the house. Mm-hmm. I did that same thing. Yeah. Like when I was still thinking I'm probably going to die at some point. Mm-hmm. Like when I still had that mindset of probably going to kill myself at some point. I'm managing right now, but at some point it's probably going to happen. Mm-hmm. I should remove any trace that they could think this was their fault from their house.
That they think they could have seen it or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Or just even any more bad memories, like...
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, nothing... I mean, I remember I had to go into the hospital once. And it was the second time I had gone in the hospital for suicide. Mm-hmm. And that was maybe like the only time I saw my dad, like, I don't know what to do. I mean, I failed you, kid, and it's like, oh, you didn't though. Uh-huh. And that really stuck with me. I mean, that stuck with me so hard. Like, yeah, man, the people who are in my corner, mm-hmm. I don't want to let them down, and I don't want to be here, but I don't want it to be your fault. Mm-hmm. And, that's the worst thing in the world. I mean, how close were you with the idea that you were going to take yourself out?
I mean, I was planning the house and doing like the impulsive things still. Yeah.
Where do you think that came from? I mean, like a sadness that deep.
I think for me it's rooted in like the loneliness and just like, and also just like I've always felt that there's something wrong with me. Like I wasn't. It's just always there.
Yes. Yeah.
And, I'm not entirely sure why. I think part of it's like the isolation that I grew up in, and I think part of it's just me,
Yeah. You're just wired for it.
Yeah, and that's just like I got into that being how I wrote my story, and mm-hmm. just got trapped in that, and then a few years ago I was working in a kitchen, and when I moved here I was going to write a book with a friend, live here for 6 months, move away and live with some other friends out in Oregon. And then when I moved here, I found a kitchen job. I got like fat. I didn't know that even like that was a job, like a chef. Like, I was so underexposed to things that people could do. And I got really, really fascinated with that life, and like started staging in the kitchen and like learned how to hold a knife and like worked my way up through all of that. So I was like, and found comedy and started doing it soon after. So it was like working like 60, 70 hours a week, like hard job, like washing dishes in between and in between cooking, and then going out late at night after the adrenaline rush and doing mics and things. But my car kept breaking down. I was very poor, very, I don't know, it wasn't a bad situation. I ended up putting myself in a situation where, like, I'd said yes to something and then I wanted to back out of it, and I couldn't at the time. And I was, like, assaulted by somebody at my job.
Oh, Jesus.
And I, like, blamed myself so much for it, and it felt like I couldn't, like, no one would believe me if I'd said that it was assault in the end, you know?
Yeah. I've seen that happen.
Yeah. So I just worked with him for like 3 months, with, like, him, which is me going insane. Just,
yeah.
Because I was working, like, 10, 12-hour days, and he came in, like, halfway through prep, kind of.
Yeah.
And then it was, like, fast-paced, like, him brushing by me, like, all these kinds of things, and, like, me eventually, like, pushing back against it and, like, saying that he was bad and not telling people why, and, like, going out back and, like, crying and punching bricks and then going back in and working, and, yeah, him just saying that I was insane, and me just, I'd never really felt, like, anger before.
Mm-hmm.
I was never an angry person. I always just, like, internalized it or, like, forgave people or felt like there was something innately, like, if I felt like I was innately bad but good, like, other people probably were struggling just as much as I was. Like, I just, like,
yeah,
let things go. And I was just, like, angry for the first time ever. But it just kind of broke me.
Yeah.
And then eventually I, like, told my coworkers, like, a half-truth about it. I didn't say that he assaulted me. I just told them what happened and how I was feeling and all those things. And they, like, pushed him out. And I, like, have started talking about it, like, processing it more over the years, but it, like, stuck with me for, like, 2 years.
Yeah.
Just in the back of my head. I felt like I was sick. Like, I felt like I had an STD, even though I didn't. I checked.
Yeah.
Like, I just felt like I was wrong, and it was just, like, always there. But I think I, like, got myself in that situation because I felt like I could handle anything.
Yeah.
But that's soon after, like, 2 years after that was when I was at my very, very lowest, you know, and it just felt like I'd always had the thing where it felt like I was always, like, every year there was at least, like, 3 to 6 months where I was just very sad and thought about suicide. And whenever I came back to that, I was like, well, I guess I came back to it. I should have done it last year. Like, it always felt like
yeah.
I should have done it. You know, I'm always going to keep wanting to do it. Why haven't I? It's like a to-do list thing. And it just got really bad at that point where it just, all I was writing were suicide notes and my joke books. And I don't know, but eventually I, like, started talking about it a little bit.
Were they funny suicide notes?
No, but I have a pretty good joke about a suicide note. Because I told my friend that's all I could write, and he was like, well, write a joke about that. I don't know how to help. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I just came out of it because I started talking to my friend who's now my husband. I told him how I was feeling, and he had an approach that nobody else had with me, where he just, like, distracted me. And I just, like, started being able to have fun again.
Yeah.
But now here we are.
Yeah. So have you come out the other side of this, or is it something that's still just a part of you that you manage?
I kind of came out a little bit on the other side, I think. I still
fresh?
Yeah. I still dip down in things too. But I haven't thought seriously about suicide in probably 2 years.
That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's huge.
Yeah. I mean, I carried it with me forever and ever. Like, it was just even when I wasn't feeling like doing it anymore. Mm-hmm. You know, it was just a part of my. It's just a part of my wiring. It was like,
yeah,
you know,
it's programmed in at this point.
You know, I can brush my teeth, or I can, you know, jam a toothbrush handle into my neck, and you know, I guess I'll brush my teeth.
Yeah.
You know, I could wait for the train, or I could jump in front of the train.
Mm-hmm.
I'll get on the train. Mm-hmm. You know, it's just there. It's always there, but it's like a thought that's, you know, no more realistic than saying, you know, I'm going to train these prairie dogs to tap dance. It's just as abstract. It's like, yeah, that's not a realistic option for me anymore. Mm-hmm. Like, isn't it funny that it used to be? Because for me, the thing that I came to recognize was that it wasn't so much that I wanted to die. It's that I wanted the parts of me to die that I didn't like. Mm-hmm. And I wanted change and didn't know how to get it. And it just seemed like it would be a lot easier if the pain was just gone. Mm-hmm. Because that's a lot easier than changing and trying to be a better person who's more self-actualized and self-realized and is willing to go through the work of calling yourself on your own bullshit. Mm-hmm. And really tearing yourself apart. Because that's the hard part.
Yeah, the work is hard.
Yeah. You ever seen a therapist on things?
Yep. Went to a therapist briefly when I was 16, and then again after my daughter was born, I went to about, I don't know, maybe 6 different ones, because I am...
Yeah.
Talking one-on-one like this is hard for me. Like, there's there's a thing in my body that just wants to shut it off. Like, yeah. I've never been good at talking. That's why I always wrote. But I have found somebody I really like. Like, she's, I still, like, close off. Like, just last time we talked about, like, how I go in and I, like, kind of hold my body and, like, like, I just shut down still. And she's good at, like, pushing through that, and it feels like she very much cares about my life.
Yeah.
She's almost cried a couple times, you know. But she's just, like, very intense, and I don't know. Oh, she also points out that I say I don't know all the time when I'm talking. But I am working through some things now that are still hard. Like, I realize I made concessions on some things in my life. Mm-hmm. And after...
Important things that you don't feel you should have?
Yeah, important things. And, like, after... I think part of it is, like, after that assault, like, with my... It took up so much of my brain that part of me was gone for forever. And, like, when I came to terms with that, I was like, okay, I'll never be who I was. I need to rebuild from where I'm at now. But there's some things that just didn't get rebuilt, and I'm still figuring out how to be alone with myself, I used to write fiction and things all the time. Ever since I started comedy, I hardly do anymore, and now especially. Like, it's just, like, a part of myself that's closed off. She mentioned, like, if you're feeling low or just anxious, make sure you're doing things in your life that you did as a child. And I don't do those things so much anymore. Like, I just do the fun, distracting things.
Right.
Because I needed that for a while. I needed to have fun. I needed to be distracted. And now I have to, like, figure out if I can get back into myself and see what's left, you know?
But that's not an easy thing to do. I mean, that's a time-consuming process. Yeah. And your husband is understanding through all this, it sounds like.
Yeah, he's very much the fun. He's like... Yeah, he's understanding. I think to the extent that he can be, it's a very personal process. I'm trying to get back to myself. I'm not trying to get back to us. It's not like something he can help with necessarily.
Sure.
You know.
Yeah, but I mean, you know, he does have to be willing to let you struggle through your process. Mm-hmm. And that's a hard thing for a loved one to watch.
Yeah. Or even, it seems like it could be like pushing away from him, you know, where it's just like, and I live with him and 4 other comics, so there's noise around me constantly, you know.
How do you, I can't even imagine.
Yeah, we've lived there for, it might be coming up on 3 years. I don't know how time works anymore.
Wow.
But
yeah,
we've had like the same group of like 4 people at least in there for a long time. Like, it's just, I don't know. I've always really liked living by myself.
Right.
But I really like living with them and like sharing everything. But it's so present, constant. Like, it's hard to kind of have any time to yourself to work on things. And if you do, you kind of feel like you're almost like pushing away from the group. Like, it's
right.
The rapport like is so constant and changing. Like, if you miss some of it, it feels like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Like you missed being part of them. We were a weird unit.
Yeah.
It's probably not healthy.
Well, maybe not. But the fun thing about that, like I used to tour in a band, and we would go everywhere. And so there's 5 of us in a van going all over the United States, making music for no money, and you get pretty tight with people, and I mean we were a lot like family, which is to say we didn't like each other. And we did our job, but I mean, we loved each other in the same sense. It was like, so it was a strange dichotomy happening all the time because you're all kind of in the service of the same thing. And so living in a house with other comics, you're all kind of part of the community. You're servicing this greater idea. You're all in it together in a way that, it's almost like being in the military, I would have to imagine, because it's like, you can't really relate necessarily with civilians.
Yeah. We're very just involved with but it's, even though we're like going through it as a group, at the same time, like comedies, again, I'm going to say it's a lonely process. It's your own thing. So everybody,
it is you.
Yeah. And everybody advances it in different ways. Everybody so if you're like moving at a different pace than the rest of the group, that kind of isolates you too. It can be like hard to celebrate like victories, I think, sometimes because it just feels like losses for the other people. So it's both good and hard for comedy to live with so many people trying to do the same thing.
Right.
Like they understand you, but you're still all doing it separate. We also are like trying to do shows and things together, like hosting shows together and stuff like that. And, trying to build that this year too, but I don't know what will happen to all of us and when we'll move out. We have such cheap rent too. Got very lucky. But
well, I mean, in this current housing nonsense, I mean, you have to. It's it's imperative. I have a friend who is in an apartment across from a terrible ex, but the apartment's like $800 a month.
Sure.
So she's like, I can just lock the doors and
Gosh.
I get it. But you've come out the other side of this ultimately. I mean, when did you first discover that you were funny? I mean, because there's no way all this sadness doesn't manifest itself in some kind of humor. Yeah,
I'm a little less dark than I was when I started, I think. But I started comedy because after I moved here, just like things started falling apart. And while I like cooking, I discovered that comedy was something people could do. Like, I'd never watched very much of it growing up. I'd seen some like British comedy. My family watched that kind of stuff. But other than that, I'd hardly seen any stand-up. It just had never occurred to me. And when I moved here, I started like doing dabs and things. I can't anymore. It makes me super anxious. But when I first first moved here, I just like, I feel like I at some point was like, I'm going to rewire my brain to write happy things. I'm sick of being serious. I want to try this. And so I just got very obsessed with the process of joke writing and late night Lions Lairs and was super charmed. You know how you are when you start. It's
Lions
just,
Lairs are rough too.
That was my favorite.
Yeah.
I loved it. I'll always remember at one point Sam told me it was just cool to see somebody care so much. Just like keep doing it, and that's like the highest I've ever felt. It's just like, hell yeah, I will Sam. I will do this. Yeah. You just feel so special when you start. You know?
Yeah. I had Deacon Gray kind of helping me out at the beginning, and then
really special.
It was very special, and then he got me into this contest, and
at Comedy Works.
Yeah, and I completely blew it because I didn't know what I was doing, and I was like, he's not going to want to see the 5 minutes that kills. Oh. He's going to want something new.
Oh, no.
So I tried to write something new, and I was working it around town, and it wasn't working. And so instead of, going back on the thing that was going to work, I was like, I know this can work. I just haven't found it yet. Mm-hmm. So it's the day of. I'm across the street at the bar, rewriting it. And then I go back to the green room. Everybody's super relaxed. Troy Walker's there, super relaxed, Like, nobody's paying attention to anything. And I'm just trying to memorize the new 5 minutes that I just wrote.
Yeah.
And I go on stage and I got some laughs, but it wasn't great.
Sure.
It was new guy stuff.
The stuff you really believe in. You never have that belief later on here, but...
And then I get off stage and Deacon comes up to me and he just looks at me and he says, "What happened to the other 5 minutes?" I was like, "I thought I'd try something new." And he went, "Huh."
Yeah, that's exactly what he does. Yeah. He was great at those just little quiet digs, you know?
And that was the best. And I saw him a couple other times, and I mean, that was certainly sad. When that all went down. I mean, that was a huge loss. But, that was kind of wonderful. It was fun to be a part of it for a minute, Getting on stage in the beginning and, when you finally get into Comedy Works, it's like Comedy Works is such a forgiving audience. Yeah. They're so
Bombing
ready to laugh.
Comedy Works is hard, but I've seen people do it.
Yeah, I've seen people do it too.
I've seen good people do it, and I just know it has to feel gut-wrenching. Like, it's so... Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, but Lion's Lair.
Yeah.
I mean, they're ready to kill you.
Sure. But when you get them, man.
Yeah.
And when you're like new, you have that shield of... Yeah, sure. Well... Yeah, but when you're new, you have that shield where even if you only get one laugh, like even if like now I would be like, "Oh, that was terrible." Yeah. You're such a rush for me at least. Like the adrenaline was insane. And
I loved
especially with like the job I had, like everything in my life was adrenaline. That's all I was running on,
Totally.
But I think when I started, I really wanted to like figure out how to make. I took the whole approach of, like, figuring out how to make the sad things funny, of, like, really turning them around in some way. Like, I've got jokes about the adoption and things that finally work.
Yeah.
And at first people just, like, especially when you're a woman, I feel like they're so ready to just go, "Aw," instead of laughing.
Yeah,
So I really wanted to find that twist where it's like, we should talk about these things and... this is a joke. Like, this is well constructed. Like, I got really fascinated with that. And I wish, like, I could be a little bit more goofy and silly. And, like, I have some of that, you know? But I think it's always going to come from a little bit more of a serious place for me. But I just want to find that twist.
Has finding the twist in the perspectives to write a joke actually changed your perspective on anything for real?
I mean, I think so. I think, like, just comedy in general taught me that, like, things can be fun. They can be light. You can, like, look at things in a different way. Like, comedy for sure saved me, in a sense, you know? Because I found the value in, like, the dark and the serious, and I thought that was, like, what art was. You know, that's what writing was. And if it can just be, like, joy is so important, and being able to, like... bring that out in yourself or in other people, like it changed how I look at things in general. It's something that I never felt before, just that amount of lightness, Yeah.
Well, that's good.
Yeah. It's all good in the end. Yeah, thank you for talking to me. This is great.
And what did I tell you? There's always something to look forward to. The conversation started a little dark, and then it got better. It was a twisty, turny conversation that was amazing. And speaking of amazing things that you can go and do, you can see Allison perform stand-up comedy tonight. Not once, but twice. First, at the Space Case Comedy at Spectra Art Space. That's on South Broadway in Denver. And then, follow her down the street to the We Still Like You show at 11 o'clock. That's a comedic storytelling show celebrating shame. That starts at 11 at Denver's Dangerous Theater. And as for me, I'm gonna go sit in the sun and listen to the birds. don't kill yourselves out there.